So good morning and good evening depending on your location. Welcome and thank you for attending the today's session on the Know the Science Behind Workflows using Git and GitHub. So my name is Nitin Valecha. I have around 8 years of experience in IT industry, and from the past many years I am using the Git for my repository in many different organizations. So today we will be learning about the workflows, the Git and the GitHub. So the Git is used for working on the repositories that we all need so that we can have a centralized repository and all the people and the developers or the testers and other people can work on some central location. They can work in parallel. So there must be some kind of understanding between them. So for that we need the workflows. So this session is for all the people who are looking forward to learn Git, GitHub, and they are also starting with the Git workflows. So the expectations from this webinar will be that at the end of this session, we will be knowing what is the version control, what is Git. There will be introduction to the GitHub, and for working on Git, we have to have the knowledge about the Git branches and different use cases. For working in Git, we have to write the workflows, and there are different use cases for using these workflows, which will help to understand a basic common understanding between different people so that they can work in parallel on Git. Then we will be introducing the GitHub Desktop that you can use for code reviews. In the meanwhile, if you have any question, you can ask through chat window, but due to some time constraints, I will try to answer most of the questions, and this session will be around 1 hour, in which it will be around 30 to 40 minutes for the PPT and 10 minutes for the demo, and then 10 more minutes for the question and answers. I will request you all to be ready with your pen and paper so that we can have some practical over diagrams. So here we will be using three technologies on which we will be learning today. One will be the Git, the second will be the GitHub that we will be using for our repositories, and the third will be workflows. So for this workflow, we will be making some kind of diagrams so that all of us will be having a proper understanding how the Git flows work. So there will be many branches, and on different branches we will be doing different kind of work, like some kind of development work, feature work, testing work, training, and one of the branches for fixing defects and hot fixes. So here we will see the job trends. So here you can see the Git and GitHub, which are basically having a high demand in the industry. So this is the simple search that we have done on indeed.com. You can yourself also go on indeed.com and search for the trending demands. So here we can see the Git as well as the GitHub, and that is the graph is, you can see in Jan 2010 it is starting, and then in 15 it is almost on the top and also going higher. And similarly for a GitHub, you can see the trend of the graph. So it is basically coming into the market, and now most of the IT companies and most of the companies in Silicon Valley and in India and rest of the part of the world are now starting to use Git mostly for the social networking, so that many people can contribute towards the development of the products, and many people can contribute in an open source way, and companies are now trying to make their product open source so that everyone can have a knowledge on that, and all the developers can share their views. So it is now gaining some traction in the industry, and it is going to go higher. Let us move to the next slide. So when we talk about Git, so we have to think about what was there previous to the Git. So here we have taken one example of SVN, which was earlier used by most of the companies that started around 2005 and peaked till 2009. And here we can have a comparison of the Git, GitHub and the SVN. You can see the Git search term is starting from the 2005 and is keeping on growing, and now in 2015 you can very well see where it is heading, and also the future trends. The dotted lines show you the future trends. Similarly for GitHub, started in 2009, and you can see in 2015 and in the future where it is going. So if any one of you is working on older systems, like one of them we have given as SVN, so you should start thinking of using some better repository and how you will work in the future. So mostly now people are moving on to Git due to the benefits that it provides, that we will also see in this session. So this is the interest over time. You can very well see the SVN decreasing and Git and GitHub in increasing. So for the beginners like who want to know what is the version control, so Git is the version control, which is like there should be a central repository in which all the people of the industry or the organization will be working on one project. So how a company provides the central repository so that many people can work and share their code. They can check in their code in the same repository. They can work in parallel, and how they can give their work in form of releases, in the form of user stories or features, and they can also fix some defects. They can work on production lines in parallel, and they can have feature branches and non-feature branches. So the version control keeps every version of your file. So that means if you have a file and if you have done changes 2 times, so the Git will take care of it in a way that it will keep both the versions in the repository, and it will tag it with the time and date at what time you have checked in and done some changes in that file, and it will also tag it with your name and your ID so that other persons can also know who has made changes. And now if you have done changes but you want to revert to the previous change, then you can go to the previous state also. So this functionality is also provided by Git. So you can revert your files back to a previous state, and you can have your versions of your project like version 1, version 2, and at some point of time you want to see what was there in the version 1 project. So you can revert the entire project also to the previous state with the help of versioning. This will be particularly helpful when you have releases for your project. So you can have look on any of the releases which you have given previously. The third thing is that you can compare the changes over time. Suppose you have entered 2 lines of code and you want to see what was there in previous in that file. So Git gives us the functionality to compare the changes that you have done and also the changes that were previously there. Also you can see who all have modified the file, as it will give the ID of the person who has changed the file, and it can be the email ID of the person in your organization, so that it is easier to pinpoint a person if anything goes wrong, or it will be easier to directly go to the person and then he can help. Also, since the Git is maintaining more versions, version 1, version 2 and more, so even if you lose a file in version n, so you can go to a previous version n-1 or n-2, and you can take that file from the previous version. So Git helps in easily recovering the lost files. So this was the version control and why we need it. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide is about Git. This tells us that a Git is a distributed revision control system. So what is a distributed revision control? The revision control can be centralized. That means there is only one central repository on which all the developers are working, or the repository can be in many places divided, or the same repository replicated in more than one place, so that if one of the site goes down, you can have the repository copied from the other place or other site. Also, the repository is copied to your local system. So if the server goes down, then you can copy the repository from your local system to the server. So that's why this is distributed, and we have the versions of the complete repository. The main benefit of Git was speed. When it was developed earlier in 2005 for Linux kernel, the speed was the main point due to which it was developed, and it also supported the distributed that we have discussed, and it gives options of linear as well as non-linear workflows. So what are linear and non-linear workflows? We will come to this while we will do the practical of creating workflows. So Git was initially designed and developed for Linux kernel in 2005, mainly for speed. The operations on Git can be performed on locally. Locally means on your system. Suppose you are working on offline, so you don't need to connect to the internet. You can work on your local system, and later when you connect to the internet, then you can put all your changes in the central repository. So that means even if you are not connected, then also you can work, which gives us a speed advantage, because whenever you upload or download from central repository, it will take time. So if you are working completely locally, so it will give you a speed advantage, as you don't have to communicate with the server. So next point is a Git can effectively handle large repositories as well as small repositories. So the complete repository can be copied to the server and then to your system also. So if any of the repository crashes, you can copy it from other repository. The performance can be increased because you can work locally or you can work online. So the checkout and check-in, these are the processes in Git. So you can work offline using these, and later you can contribute your changes to the central repository. The size of the data on the client side as well as the size on your local system. So both of the size of the repository will be same, and you can use any of the repository on your local or on your server, and you can insert or update your code from the central repository and also work on your local repository. And Git makes sure to keep the entire history of the project. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So these are the Git features. So Git is a completely distributed version control system, and every Git working directory is full-fledged repository with complete history. So it maintains all the history, and you can know who has done the changes and when he has done the changes. The version tracking capabilities, you can have the version 1, version 2 or any number of versions of your project, so that you can go to any of the version if you want. This is independent of network access. As I have told, you can work online as well as offline. You can have a central repository, or you can copy the repository to your local system. That will increase the performance as you will be working locally. You can scale your repository, you can add or delete files as you want. And the Git provides a command like check in, check out, pull, push. So these commands help us in maintaining and working with our repository. So the basic feature of Git is like it is speed and fast, due to which it is now an upcoming repository using feature that most of the companies are working on. So let us start with the use cases for which we want that we can work in different roles. Suppose you want to work on different projects, but you want that for different projects there will be separate branches. So you can have a separate branch for separate projects, and later you can switch your branches, and you can wear many hats and you can change as you want. So next slide will be a feature based workflow. So there, as you know, that there can be many features in a product. So you can create new branches according to the new features on which you are working, so that you can switch back and forth between them on case to case basis. And when you have completed the feature work, you can switch to the previous branch or the next branch. This is particularly helpful when you are working on many features on the same time, but for one feature you have high priority and for other feature you have low priority. So in that case you can have multiple branches and you can work on any of them depending on your priority. Later we will also create few branches, and we will try to see how we will switch from one to another. Okay, so this is the next use case in which we will be working in parallel mode. Here we can see there are so many developers or testers and engineers working on only one project, but they are working on different features. So as we can see, all of them are working in parallel, and the main feature of Git is that it allows us to work in parallel, and all the people can work on their feature, so that nobody depends on another person to complete his work on, and then to start his or her work. So all of them, as we can see, are working in parallel, and nobody depends on another. Similarly, in Git we have branches, and all of them can create their own branch to work on their feature. So here let's have an example. So I will be using a pen. So suppose this is a main line, represented as M. Okay. So this is the main repository, and there are two persons, person A and person B, and both of them want to work on this main line. M is our main line. Okay. So I want all of you to create a simple 3 lines or 4 lines diagram to depict how A and B can work in parallel. So A also wants the same repository and B also wants the same repository. So what they can do? So they can check out the branch from this point onwards, and then here A can start doing his work, and he goes on doing his work. Similarly, B can also take a copy of this repository here on his local system, and then B can also start doing his work. So this is how A and B can both work in parallel without obstructing each other. And also we can see that whatever they do, even if it is not right, they are doing it in their own personal branch, and they are not doing any major issues in the main branch. So this is the parallel scenario, and A and B are working on their branch. Now suppose at this point A is done with his work, so he can put his work back to the main line. Okay, so this is how A has done his work without affecting B. Also B is also doing his work, and he is taking his time, and he does not bothers A, neither he is waiting for A to complete his work. And suppose now B has done his work here, and at this point he gives his project to the central repository, that is the main line. So in this way we see that this is the parallel workflow through which A and B both have taken the central repository from here, and they have done their work independently and then checked in to the main line. So this use case is independent. So independent means a person wants to work, but he is not allowed to work directly on the main line. So he can have his personal branch, and on that personal branch he can work independently. He can take his own time, and he can do right or wrong things in his personal branch without affecting main lines and others. You can see there are too many persons who want or are dependent on the main line. So any one of them can do any harm in the main line. So we can see that we have taken one independent branch, and the person in red, he is working on his personal independent branch so that he does not interfere with the work of the main line, as well as all the persons that you can see in yellow, green and blue colors, they can also not interfere with the work of A. So that means we have a main line here and person in red here. So he has taken his work from here, from the main line. He has started at this point and he is doing his work independently, and other people are not bothering him, as well as he is also not bothering or doing anything in the main line. So next use case is dummy projects. So what do you mean by dummy projects? So most of the people in IT know that whenever there is a prototype work, so they have to make 2 or 3 prototypes generally for doing any kind of project work. But at the end, only one of them is used for final production. So what should they do so that they can work on 2 or 3 prototypes and create dummy projects, and at the end they can choose any one of the dummy projects as well, or they can later come to these dummy projects that will be there in the repository. So we will make a workflow diagram to depict this scenario. So this is our main line, and this is the person A. He starts his work at this point, takes his branch, does this work, and later finishes on prototype 1. Okay. Then at second, he takes one more line, does prototype work for second project, and pushes it to main line. So now you can see he can have as many branches as he want for the prototype work. Also, he can work in parallel on a third prototype, which he is still working on and is yet to finish and not finished yet. So he can work on as many prototypes as he want. Okay, so this is the dummy project. So he can switch between 1, he can switch between 3, and here he can switch between 2 and 3, and depending on the priority of the feature work or the dummy prototype work, he can switch any of the branches and work in parallel or sequential, like 1 after 2 or 1 or 3 in parallel. Okay. Okay, we will go to the next slide. So here you can see a train track, railway track. The headline says that the release blocks work on main branch. So suppose a developer A, if he starts working directly on the main branch and he accidentally enters some kind of wrong code directly into the main line. So it will stop other people from doing their work. So that's why it is never told that we should work directly on main line. So we should work only in parallel branches, and when we are sure and we have tested our product that now all the quality and the product, everything is working fine, only then we will merge our feature or project work into the main branch. So what workflow we can have? We can have a main line here and a person A here. We will not allow A to directly work on this main line. Okay. What we will say to A? We will say that start and copy this repository on your local, and now you are free to work. And now suppose A does something wrong here. So the people who are working on main line like B, C, D, now they can use the mainline feature as the defect that A has entered is still on his branch and not on mainline. Okay. So the person A is not blocking the persons B, C and D. The person A is only blocked due to his mistake. Okay, so that's why it is beneficial to work on your own personal branch so that nobody comes to bother you, and also you can take your own time to complete your work. But if you have done some mistake directly on mainline, then you have to do it on high priority because it is stopping the work of persons B, C and D and other people also. Okay. Okay, we will go to the next slide. So next use case is repository. So whenever you are creating a project, so you will be using some kind of repository so that if your laptop crashes, so at that time your code will be there on some kind of central repository which is still accessible to all other people, as well as when your laptop comes back again from the crash, then you can start and copy the project from the central repository. So the repository is needed for a backup, restore, and it should be a fault tolerant. so that in case of a crash, there should be multiple copies of it stored on multiple sites like A, B and C. So here you can see, so suppose there is a site 1 and you have a repository here, and suppose this repository crashes. So you should have a backup of your repository, like multiple backups at site 1, site 2. These sites can be in multiple places or multiple countries. Okay, so whenever one of the site goes down, there should be a backup on some other site. Similarly, you will have a repository on your local laptop as well as on some kind of central place in which all your repositories are placed. And for this, we will be using GitHub to create our repository. Okay, so it will be kind of a central repository of us, and even if our project work goes from our local desktop or laptop, we still can have access to the central repository, and also other people can also contribute and have access to that central repository. Okay, so this was the use case of why we should use a repository that should be fault tolerant, and we should be able to have a backup and restore facility. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. The other use case will be that you can take your time since you are not working on the main line. So the person A can have his personal branch and he can take 1 month or 2 months or 3 months depending on the size of the feature. But the person who are using mainline, they can still continue their own work. So that's why a parallel branch from the mainline, that is your personal, you can take your time depending on the kind of feature work you are doing. Okay, but if you are doing work on directly on mainline, you have to do that on high priority. But the feature work depends on the priority of that feature, and you can take your time depending on your speed. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. The other benefit of Git is you can work online as well as offline. So this we have already discussed, that if you don't have the internet connection, still you can work on your laptop, and later when you have internet connection, you can connect to the internet and then you can check in your repository to the central repository. So this gives the benefits to working online as well as offline, and also gives the benefit of speed. You can do your work faster as you don't have to sync up with the central repository. Okay, so next use case will be testing. So you can have your branches like for development, for testing, for any kind of feature work. You can do testing as long as you want depending on your feature, and you can take as much time as you want. And when the feature is completely tested, only then you can check in depending on your speed. So next use case will be training. So you can use the branches for training purpose. You can create a branch, you can delete a branch, or you can create any number of branches that you want, as it will not take much time for creating branches. But in case you work directly on mainline, it may have wrong implications. So whenever you have parallel branches, you can create the branches whenever you want, as well as you can delete your branches. So what is the benefit of deleting a branches? So suppose you have prototype work that you don't want to save, or you have made 5 or 10 prototypes, but at the end you have used only one of them. So you can dispose the other branches and you can just delete them if you don't need them any further. Okay, you can abandon your work on, or you can use it. So nobody else is seeing it, as you have your own personal branches unless you check into the main line. Okay, so this is the Git staging area. So the working direct, here you can see a diagram how Git works from your laptop to the central repository. So on the top you can see the working directory. That working directory can be on your laptop, and the repository at the bottom, that can be a central repository. So whenever you have done some changes, you put your changes in a staging area. A staging area is an area between the working directory and the repository, so that you can check in your code till to the staging area, and after that you can see what all files you have changed or what all you want to commit, or if you want to commit only a subset of all the files that you have changed. So the staging area helps us to overcome this scenario when you want to review all the files that you have changed. Okay, so you will be adding your files from the working directory, and from the staging area you will be committing your files to the repository. So in this way your changes go to your local, to the repository, and for this you will be needing branches and workflow. So we will be coming to the workflow now. So to create your repository, we will be using the GitHub, in which you can create your central repository. That is a GitHub is a central repository hosting service which provides a distributed revision control just like Git, and it is a for source code management. So you can track your feature work, you can track your defects, or for management work, or you can give a description on wiki on a GitHub. So basically we can use it for our repository hosting, so that other people can also access this central repository and can contribute to our repository. It will also give us a graphical interface and a desktop as well as a mobile integration, and you can have different access control for different people, like for your team, for your organization, as well as for people outside of your organization also. Okay, so this is a Git flows. On the left hand side you can see a sequential flow. So as you can see, there are three people. They can do their work only when one of them has finished their work. So you can be on step 1, then only on step 2. Okay, then you can go to step 3. So you can see you are going it sequentially, because the second person is dependent on the first person due to the feature work, and the third person is dependent on both 1 and 2. Okay, so this is a sequential flow. That means the second feature is dependent on the first feature, and third feature is dependent on first and second. So whenever the previous is finished, only then the next can be started. Okay, and the next one is the parallel flow. Here you can see person 1 can do his work, as well as person 2 can also do his work, and both of them are independent of each other, and they can do their work depending on their speed, and nobody relies on another person or another feature. Okay, so this is sequential and this is parallel. Sorry. Okay, we will go to the next slide. So for doing this, we will be having the Git branches that we have already discussed. So this will be our main line, and we will have the branches for different person. Okay, these are branches for A, this is a branch for B. Okay, so these are different branches, and whenever person A has completed his work, then he checks into the main line. So that's why we create branches and we don't work on the main line. a branch can be for many purposes. It can be for a defect, it can be for a user story also. A user story can be a feature. Okay, so that's why we have different branches. Okay, so we will be starting with a demo. So this you can see a demo of a GitHub Desktop. Here you can see the code changes that you can compare. You can see who has done the changes, how he has done the changes, and at what time or day he has done the changes. Also you can see the color coding of what lines is removed and what lines are now entered. So in the green you can see the lines entered, and in the red you can see which line is removed. So this is how we compare our work from the previous work. So this is particularly useful for code reviews. When you do the code review of other person, this tool is particularly helpful. And this is done using GitHub Desktop. Okay. So we will be going to the next slide. Here you can see the branch diagram. So on the left hand side, you can see a parallel one. So this is for person A. He is doing his work in parallel, and this is for person B. Okay. And this is our main line. So this is parallel, and A and B is not dependent on each other. And on the right hand side you can see the sequential. As you can see, this is the branch for person A, but the person B depends on the work that A is doing. So A has completed half of his feature, and later B has taken work from this point onwards. From A, he has done until this point and merged his work to the work done by A. So this is called sequential. So the work are dependent on each other. The second work can be started only the first work has finished, and then later A combines the work of both A and B branch and then merges to the main line here. Okay, so this is sequential. Okay, so this is the workflow for the branching diagrams. So we will be going to the next slide now. So here you can see the GitFlow workflow that most of the IT organizations are following. So this is on the top, you can see the master branch on all the main line. So in the main line you have releases or versions that we have discussed. You can have releases or version 1, version 2 or version N of your project. Okay, and in the second you can see the line for defects. Okay, this is for defects. Here you can see there was a defect on the main line, and we have given a hot fix here and directly worked on mainline in some exceptional scenarios. Okay. The third one is the release branch, in which we can cut our releases. This one is the development branch, in which you can start doing your work in different features. This is like feature 1, this is feature 2. Here you can see we have taken the branch from the development branch and we have checked in to the development branch feature 1. Okay, and the feature 2 is still continuing, and we can take our time to complete the feature work. Okay, so this was the Git flow, and later we merge to the development branch, and then we have a release at this point, and we can also tag a release, and we can also refer to the previous releases also. So this was the Git flow and how we create different branches and different flows. Okay, so do you have any questions then you can write in the chat window, and I can try to answer most of them due to time constraints. Okay, so someone is asking like what will be the different branches when we actually go to production. So the actual branches will be like the main line, the feature branches, or the defect branches. Okay, so what someone is asking, what will the Git flow? So Git flow is used for maintaining our repository and checking in our code. Also, many different people should have a common understanding so that they can work in parallel. Okay, the kind of workflows. The kind of workflows we have discussed, one of them is like parallel, one of them is sequential, other can be the Git flow. We can work in different features in parallel mode, as well as we can work on feature in a sequential mode, depending on the feature and the time that it takes. Okay, so someone is asking how do we collaborate when we have to work in parallel. Okay, so when you are working in parallel, whenever you check in your code, so there will be an error message if there is kind of overwriting the code. So you have to see where is the overwriting is being done. Then you have to resolve that issue, and only when that issue is resolved, then you can go ahead and merge to the main line. Okay, so one is asking what is hotfix. Hotfix we have used for the defect branch. Defect branch can be marked as depending on the defects, or it can be written as a hotfix branch. Hotfix is generally used when you are in a fix in a hurry and you want to provide a fix to the client. So you will directly use the main line, and will take a hotfix branch, and then you will check in your code from the hotfix branch to the mainline branch. Okay. Okay. So one is asking what is dependent branches. So dependent branches are one in which we will be working in sequential flow, and when we will finish the feature work of A, only then we will be starting the feature work of B. So that means they are dependent on each other. We can have both the branches in parallel. We can start with the feature work of A, and then we can take the branch B from branch A. So that will make it a sequential. You can finish the feature work of A, then you can take the work from A to B, and then the B can start working on the project that will include the work from both A and B. Now someone is asking, can we suspend our current work in one branch and move to the next branch? Yes, we can suspend the work from the current branch, and we can switch between other branches also. We can move to the next branch, and later we can resume our work again on the existing branch. Someone is asking, is it possible to push code from Windows? Yes, it is possible to push the code from Windows. We can use Git, and we will have a central repository on GitHub, and we will be using the GitHub Desktop to push our code in the central repository. So one is asking, what is the best way to resolve the conflicts when we are working with multiple branches? So when we have a multiple branches, we should see where is a conflict occurring, and depending on the feature work, we have to resolve the conflicts manually, and only then we have to go ahead and check in. So best way is the manual to resolve all the conflicts. Okay. So someone is asking, how are branches interlinked if we have create branches according to different features? So branches are linked, and branches are named according to their feature. And if we have a sub feature, means a feature dependent on other feature, so we have some kind of tracking in the name of the branch, so that just by reading the name of the branch we can have all the interlinking between different branches and different features. Okay, one is asking how can I get all Git commands? So we can have Git commands using the Git tool. You can write Git help. It will help you with all the commands, and you have to install the Git software as well as a Git Desktop. You have to also create a repository in GitHub, and you can start your work. Someone is asking how difference of changes of A will reflect to B. Okay, so one can push and pull changes from other branches to their own branches. Similarly, the person A can get the work done by B to his branch by pulling his code, and he can take the work from the main line also to his branch. Okay, so one is asking if two people edit the same code, then how will it be handled? So if two people are writing the same code at the same time and they try to merge or check in, so there will be a conflict, and the person who is checking in the code and who is the second one, then he has to resolve the conflict manually, and then only he will be allowed to check in. One is asking if we are working offline, then how another repository created? Okay, so for creating a repository you have to be online. If you are using GitHub, then you can clone the repository on your local, then you can work offline. And if you want to create one more repository, then you have to go online and you can create more repository. Or the second way will be you can create a repository locally on your laptop, and then you can upload a repository also when you connect to the internet. So one is asking what is stashing. So whenever you have done some changes on your local and you want to remove all the changes on your local so that it will be in the state of the main line, or when at the point when you have started the cloning. So to forego on all your changes locally, you can use git stash. So one is asking what is the difference between distributed version control and centralized. So as I have told, the centralized is only at one place, and distributed is you keep the copies of your repository at multiple places, so that whenever one of the place goes down, the second one can come over and you can switch to the second repository. Next question is who will take care of merging the code to main branch? So when you are done with your quality testing, when you are sure that all the changes are proper, it will not break the mainline changes, at that point of time you will be the person who will be responsible to check in your code to the main branch. And if there is a conflict, at the time of checking in, you will be the person who will be resolving that conflict, and only then after that you will be allowed to checking to the main line. Okay, so in the interest of time, we can answer only this much questions. Thanks for your time and for attending this session. Hope this would have helped in starting your GitHub and workflows, and you will be able to create your workflows parallel, sequential, and GitFlow. Thank you and bye.